Parents demand I shift the date of my wedding that I planned and invited them for 8 months. Alright, so let me paint you a picture. Imagine you've been with someone for, let's say, 6 years. You're crazy about each other and you finally decide it's time to get hitched. That was me and Jess, my girlfriend, well, fiancé, then wife. We'd been through it all, ups and downs, and after all that time, popping the question felt right. We set a date about 8 months down the line, giving everyone heaps of time to clear their schedules, especially our families. Now, I gotta admit, my family's always been a bit of a mess, especially when it comes to being fair. I mean, growing up, I always felt like I was living in the shadow of my older brother Mike. He was the golden child, the high achiever. My folks would light up talking about his grades, his sports. Hell, even the way he breathed seemed to win them over. And then there was me, the classic underdog, the second fiddle. I guess you could say I got used to it, but it always stung a bit, you know? So when we told everyone about the wedding, I was kind of tense about how it would go down with my folks. But to my surprise, they seemed genuinely excited. They even started giving me advice on planning the wedding, and man, it felt good. Like, maybe things were turning around. Fast forward to about 4 months before the big day, and Jess and I are deep into planning mode. Venue booked, caterer lined up, DJ sorted, the works. It was shaping up to be the kind of cozy, intimate wedding we'd always wanted. Then, about a month before the wedding, we sent out the official invites. We had already given everyone the heads up, so this was just the formal bit. That's when things took a weird turn. My parents call me up, and I can tell right off the bat something's off. They're all hesitant and awkward, which isn't like them at all. Turns out, they had some big news. Yeah, the kind of news you know you won't like. Apparently, my brother, the star of the family, had landed some massive deal at work. A real high-flyer move. And as a celebration, he planned a surprise family trip to Australia. Yep, kangaroos, koalas, the Great Barrier Reef, the whole shebang. Here's the kicker. The trip was scheduled right over the week of my wedding. I mean, what are the odds, right? So there I am on the phone, trying to process this. My folks are going on about this amazing opportunity, how it's all expenses paid by Mike's company, and how it's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing. Then, the real bomb drops. They're actually considering going on this trip instead of coming to my wedding. They even had the guts to suggest maybe I could, postpone the wedding. Just push it back a few weeks so they can do both. I wish I could tell you I handled it cool, but I was boiling inside. All those years of being second best, and here we were again. But you know what? I played cool. Told them I'd think about it. But between you and me, there was no way Jess and I were postponing. We'd planned everything to a T. People had already made arrangements, and the venue was booked and paid for. The next few days were rough. I talked to Jess about it, and she was super supportive. She knew all about my family dynamics and told me straight, "It's your day, and those who care will be there." That stuck with me. So we decided we weren't budging. The wedding was happening no matter who showed up. Time ticked on, and the tension was kind of eating at me. I kept thinking about all the family gatherings where Mike was the star, and I was just there, always in the background. It hurt, not gonna lie. Part of me wanted to confront them, tell them how selfish they were being. But another part of me wondered if it was even worth it. Like, would they even get it? Or would it just be another scene out of the many where I came out feeling like the villain? A week before the wedding, my decision was made. We were going forward, with or without them. Alright, so after deciding not to postpone the wedding, I thought that was it. Like, I figured the worst part was over, and now I could just focus on getting married. But nope. Turns out there was more drama waiting to unfold. Let me take you back to the moment when I first realized my family wasn't going to be there. I mean, I kind of knew deep down after that whole Australia thing, but it didn't fully hit me until the night before the wedding. Jess and I were at the rehearsal dinner with her family and close friends, and everyone was super pumped. The vibe was great, just how you'd want it to be before a wedding. But then I started noticing all the little things, like how Jess's family was there in full force, and how they were making jokes, reminiscing about when Jess was a kid, talking about how they couldn't wait for the big day. All those small details really started to get to me, and it wasn't like I was expecting my family to be all over me or anything, but damn, It felt weird knowing they were off enjoying themselves in Australia while I was about to get married. My brother Mike especially. He didn't even text me good luck or anything. Not that I expected him to, honestly, but, a small part of me hoped he might. Instead, I'm just sitting there, trying to laugh along with Jess's uncle's dad jokes, but my head's somewhere else. Then, Jess's dad pulls me aside. Now I love this guy. He's been nothing but great to me since day one. He's the type of guy who gives you a beer and wants to chat about life. None of that fake small talk stuff. He looks at me, real serious, and says, "You alright, kid? You've been kind of quiet tonight." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm good. Just a lot on my mind, I guess." He nods because he's the kind of guy who just gets it without me having to explain everything. But then he hits me with this, it doesn't matter who's not here tomorrow. The only people that matter are the ones who are there. Man, that hit me hard. It wasn't anything profound or poetic, but it was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. I knew he was right. Still, part of me couldn't shake that nagging feeling that something was missing. I didn't say anything to Jess about it, though. No way was I going to let my family's screw-ups ruin her night, or the wedding for that matter. So fast forward to the day of the wedding. It's about an hour before the ceremony, and we're getting ready. I'm standing in front of the mirror, fixing my tie for the 10th time because my hands were shaking like crazy. Not from nerves about marrying Jess, but more from this weird sense of emptiness. It's hard to explain. Like, on one hand, I'm about to marry the love of my life, but on the other, it felt like my own family couldn't care less. And that's when I get a text from my mom. I hadn't heard from her since the call where she basically asked me to delay my wedding. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to open it, but curiosity got the best of me. It was some long-winded message about how they were having an amazing time in Australia, and she hoped everything was going well with the wedding. She even threw in a wish we could be there at the end, as if that somehow made everything okay. I remember staring at my phone, feeling a mix of anger and disappointment. Like, did they really not get it? Did they not understand what it meant to me to have them there? Or did they just not care? I put my phone away, trying not to think about it too much, but you know how it is. Once it's in your head, it's hard to shake. I kept running through all the years growing up, how they always put Mike first. It was like one big highlight reel of my parents bending over backward for him and making me feel like an afterthought. Every birthday, every holiday, every family event, it always came back to Mike. And now, here I was on the biggest day of my life and they were doing it again. Jess's brother Dave came into the room a few minutes later, all smiles. He's a good dude, and I was grateful to have him as one of my groomsmen. He was talking about how everything was set and how excited he was. But I wasn't really paying attention. I was too lost in my head. I guess he picked up on it because he stopped mid-sentence and asked, "Hey, you all right, man?" I kind of laughed it off, saying, "Yeah, just nervous, But he wasn't buying it. "Come on, dude, this is your day. Don't let anything mess with it." He was right. But it's not like you can just flip a switch and suddenly be fine, Still, I appreciated the support. He gave me a pat on the back, told me he'd see me out there, and left the room. At that point, I took a deep breath and decided I needed to pull it together. Jess didn't deserve a mopey groom, especially not after everything she'd done to make this day perfect. So I pushed all the crap with my family to the back of my mind and got ready to walk down the aisle. When the ceremony started, all the nerves I'd been feeling kind of melted away. Seeing Jess walking toward me in her dress, with her dad by her side, it was like everything else disappeared. I know it sounds cheesy, but in that moment, it really was just about us. The whole world could have been burning down around us, and I wouldn't have cared. We said our vows, exchanged rings, and just like that, we were married. The reception was amazing, too. Everyone was laughing, dancing, and having a great time. Jess looked so happy, and that's all I really needed. But then, toward the end of the night, I noticed something. Despite all the fun, despite how great the day had been, there was still this small part of me that couldn't let go of the fact that my parents weren't there. It's like, even when everything was perfect, there was this little shadow hanging over me, reminding me that I was still second best to Mike. But you know what? As the night went on, I realized something. It didn't matter that they weren't there. Sure, it hurt, and it probably always would, but the people who showed up for me, the ones who were there to support Jess and me on our big day, those were the people who mattered.
They were my real family now.
And maybe that's what getting married is all about, creating your own family with people who actually give a damn about you. By the end of the night, I was tired, emotional, and honestly, just relieved. It had been one hell of a day, and despite everything with my parents, I knew I'd made the right choice. So, after the wedding was done and dusted, I thought things would finally settle down. Like, okay, my parents ditched my wedding for a vacation with my brother, but I'd gotten through it, right? I was married to the love of my life, and it was time to move forward. But nope, of course, the drama wasn't over. It's like every time I think I'm done dealing with my family's nonsense, they manage to find a way to pull me back in. The day after the wedding, Jess and I were just relaxing, trying to soak it all in. We were going through the photos our friends had sent us, laughing at some of the goofy moments, and just enjoying the fact that we were finally married. I was in a good place, or at least I was trying to be. Then my phone buzzes. I glance over and see a bunch of missed calls from my parents. And texts. Like a lot of texts. They must have been blowing on my phone since the night before, but I'd been too wrapped up in everything to even notice. Now, a smarter person might have ignored the whole thing and just let it go, but I'm not that smart. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the messages. It was exactly what I expected. My mom had sent this long, guilt-trippy text about how they were so disappointed in me for going through with the wedding without them. She went on about how they had trusted me when I said I'd wait until they got back from Australia, and how heartbroken they were to find out I didn't keep my word. My dad's texts weren't much better, basically just echoing what my mom said, throwing in a few passive-aggressive digs about family values and how I'd betrayed them. I can't even explain how pissed I was reading those messages. Like, did they seriously think I was going to put my entire wedding on hold so they could go on some tropical vacation with Mike? The nerve of it. They had the audacity to act like I was the bad guy in this situation, like I was the one who'd let them down. Meanwhile, they were the ones who decided sipping cocktails on a beach was more important than watching their own son get married. I showed the text to Jess, and she just shook her head. She's always been way more level-headed about these things than I am. She told me to let it go, that we didn't need their negativity ruining the vibe of our new married life. And she was right, but man, it was hard. It felt like this giant weight sitting on my chest, knowing my parents were out there, blaming me for their own choices. Against my better judgment, I decided to call them. I knew it wouldn't go well, but I also knew I couldn't just leave things hanging like this. I needed to get some stuff off my chest. So I dialed my mom's number, took a deep breath, and waited for her to pick up. She answered almost immediately. Before I could even say hi, she was already on a tear, going on about how devastated they were, how all the relatives were asking why they weren't at the wedding, and how embarrassed they were. I didn't say anything at first, just let her get it all out. But the longer she talked, the angrier I got. It was like they weren't even thinking about me or my feelings. It was all about them, their embarrassment, their disappointment. When she finally paused, I jumped in. Mom, you didn't come to my wedding. You chose to go on vacation with Mike.
How is that my fault?
There was this silence on the other end, like she couldn't believe I'd actually called her out on it. Then she started backpedaling, saying they had no idea I'd actually go through with it without them, that if they had known how serious I was, they would have skipped the trip. But come on, I had told them. I made it clear we weren't postponing, but they just didn't care. I pointed all that out to her, and the conversation quickly spiraled into an argument. My dad jumped in at some point, trying to calm things down by basically siding with my mom. He kept saying stuff like, "You should have been more upfront with us, and we could have worked something out." Yeah, right. Like what? Postpone the wedding until it fit their vacation schedule. No thanks. The more we argued, the more I realized how pointless it was. They weren't listening to me. They never had. It was like everything I said went in one ear and out the other. They'd already decided that I was the problem, and nothing I could say was going to change that. So I finally just snapped. You know what? I'm done. I've spent my whole life being second place to Mike, and I'm not doing it anymore. You missed my wedding. That's on you, not me. I'm tired of pretending like this is okay. Have a great life with your golden child, because I'm out. And I hung up. It felt good for about 30 seconds. Then the regret hit. Not because I didn't mean what I said, but because I knew things were about to get even messier. Jess could see it all over my face and gave me one of those looks, like she knew exactly what I was thinking. You did what you had to do, she said. They weren't going to change. She was right, of course. Still, I couldn't help but feel like I'd just blown up the last bridge between me and my family. But at the same time, it was like a weight had been lifted. For the first time in forever, I'd actually stood up for myself, instead of just letting them walk all over me. It felt weird. Liberating, but weird. Over the next few days, things were quiet. I didn't hear from my parents, and honestly, I was fine with that. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally realize they were in the wrong and were giving me some space to cool down. But nope, that wasn't the case. One morning, about a week later, I woke up to find my phone flooded with notifications. I checked, and it was like my entire extended family had decided to chime in on the situation. Apparently, my parents had gone full pity party, telling everyone how I had cut them off and disrespected the family. My inbox was full of messages from aunts, uncles, cousins, you name it, all giving me their 2 cents about how I needed to apologize and make things right. That's when it hit me. My parents weren't going to change. They were never going to see things from my perspective. In their eyes, I'd always be the troublemaker, the one who never lived up to Mike's standards. And now they were dragging the whole family into it. So I did what I probably should have done a long time ago. I muted the group chat, blocked my parents for good, and decided that from now on, I was going to focus on the people who actually cared about me. Jess, her family, my friends, they were the ones who had my back. And honestly, that was enough. This whole thing had been a wake-up call. I didn't need my parents' approval, and I sure as hell didn't need their drama. From here on out, I was going to live my life on my terms. And if they couldn't handle that, well, that was their problem, not mine. So, after everything that happened, I figured it was time to just move on. I'd said my piece, I'd told my parents exactly how I felt, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just sitting there, taking their crap. I was done being second place to Mike, done letting them push me around like my feelings didn't matter. I blocked them, muted the family chat, and honestly, for a few days, it felt like things were going to be fine. I had Jess, we were married, and it felt like we could finally start this new chapter in our lives without all the extra baggage. Or so I thought. But here's the thing. Just because you've decided to cut ties doesn't mean the other person's going to let it go. And my parents? Yeah, they definitely weren't going to let it go. About 2 weeks after the wedding, I'm sitting on the couch with Jess, just watching TV and chilling, when my phone buzzes. It's a number I don't recognize, so I ignore it. A few minutes later, it buzzes again. Same number. Then I start getting texts. It's my mom. Apparently, she'd figured out that I blocked her on my main number, so she was using some other phone to reach me. The text started off pretty much like I expected.
We need to talk.
You can't just cut your family out. This isn't how family works. You get the idea. At first, I was annoyed. Like, seriously, how hard is it to just respect someone's boundaries? I didn't respond, thinking maybe she'd get the hint if I ignore her long enough. But nope, she kept texting, and each message was more dramatic than the last. She started throwing in stuff like, "You're breaking your father's heart, and your brother misses you." Yes, sure, my brother misses me about as much as I miss getting kicked in the head. Jess saw the look on my face and asked what was going on. I handed her my phone, and she just sighed. "You know they're not going to stop, right?" she said, and I knew she was right. My parents have this way of turning everything into a huge deal when they don't get their way. I'd seen it a million times growing up. Anytime Mike or I did something they didn't like, they'd go full guilt trip mode. And honestly, it worked when we were kids. But now, I was too tired to play those games. After the text didn't get a response, my mom switched gears. She started sending voice messages, which is next level annoying, by the way. It's like I can read a text and move on, but a voice message? It's a whole new level of commitment. You gotta stop what you're doing, press play, and listen to someone's emotional rant. I tried ignoring those too, but after a while, my curiosity got the better of me. I press play on one of the messages, and the first thing I hear is my mom crying. She was going on about how I was being unfair, how they'd done everything for me my whole life, and how it wasn't right for me to just cut them off like this. It was the same guilt trip, just with more tears this time. She even dragged Mike into it, saying how he had no idea I was upset and how he was worried about me. Yeah, right. The same guy who'd spent most of my childhood making my life miserable was suddenly concerned about my feelings? Sure, Mom, that tracks. I didn't respond to the voice messages either, which just made things worse. A few days later, I get an email. This time it's my dad. Now, my dad's not usually the one to get emotional. He's more of the quiet disappointment type. But this email? Man, it was like he'd been saving all his feelings for one big dump. He started off saying how disappointed he was in me, how I disrespected the family by going through with the wedding without them there. He wrote this long paragraph about how, as my father, he'd always tried to do what was best for me, and how he couldn't understand why I'd treat them this way. He even brought up stuff from years ago, trying to paint this picture of him being the perfect dad who never did anything wrong. And look, I get it. Parents don't like to think they messed up, but come on. The guy spent most of my life making it clear Mike was his favorite. He never had time for me unless it was to tell me how I could be more like my brother. So reading this email, it felt like he was just rewriting history to make himself look better. He even ended it with some line about family sticking together no matter what. I put my phone down and just stared at the ceiling for a while after reading that. Like, what do you even say to that? Part of me wanted to respond, to lay it all out and tell him exactly why I was done with their crap. But I knew it wouldn't matter. No matter what I said, they'd twist it around, make it about how I was the one in the wrong, how I was the one breaking up the family. Jess could tell I was frustrated, and she sat next to me, holding my hand.
You don't have to answer them, she said.
You've already said everything you needed to. And she was right. I had said my piece. There was nothing else to add, so I didn't respond. I deleted the email, blocked the new number my mom had been using, and tried to move on. But here's the thing. It's never that simple with family, is it? Even when you try to cut ties, there's always that part of you that feels guilty. Like, maybe I should have handled it differently. Maybe I should have tried harder to explain why I was hurt. But at the same time, I knew deep down that it wouldn't have changed anything. My parents had made their choices, and so had I. The hardest part was the extended family. Once my parents realized I wasn't responding to them, they started spreading the word to my aunts, uncles, cousins, basically anyone who'd listen. Suddenly, I'm getting messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, telling me how family is everything and how I needed to make amends. It was like my parents had launched a full-scale PR campaign against me. At one point, my aunt, who I barely even know, called me to say that my mom was in a really bad place and that I needed to reach out to her before things got worse. I didn't know what to say, so I just hung up.
It was exhausting.
I felt like I was being pulled in every direction, with everyone telling me how I should feel, what I should do. Jess was a rock through all of it. She kept reminding me that we were building our own life now, and that meant setting boundaries. You don't owe them anything, she'd say. And as hard as it was to accept, I knew she was right. My parents had spent years making me feel like I was less important than Mike, and this was just the final straw. So after a few more rounds of ignoring calls, texts, and emails, I finally came to terms with it. I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their drama. They made their choices, and I made mine. It wasn't easy, and yeah, there's still part of me that feels guilty. But at the end of the day, I knew I had to protect my peace, even if it meant cutting ties with the people who were supposed to be my family. And honestly, I think I'm better off for it. So here we are. I'm sitting in my apartment. Jess is out grabbing groceries, and I'm just thinking about everything that's gone down over the last few months. It's crazy to think how much has changed since we got married, and not all of it in ways I expected. Cutting off my parents was something I never thought I'd actually go through with, but looking back now, it feels like the right call. Still, even though I'm confident I made the right choice, there's been a lot to unpack. The weirdest part about cutting off my parents isn't the silence. It's the noise that's still in my head. Like, I thought once I blocked them and muted the family group chat, I'd feel free. And yeah, for the most part one do. But some nights, I still think about everything that's happened. I wonder if things could have been different, if maybe I'd handled it better. And I know I've said it before, but I really did try. I gave them chances. I even confronted them when I didn't want to, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they'd realize what they were doing. But nah, they kept playing the same games, expecting me to fall in line. That's what really bugs me. It's like they couldn't see me as my own person. I was just the other son, the one who wasn't Mike, the one who didn't hit the marks they set. Even when they missed my wedding, it wasn't about me.
It was about them.
Their vacation, their embarrassment. I thought once they saw how much it hurt me, they'd stop. But no, they doubled down, dragging the whole family into it, turning me into the bad guy. It wasn't about understanding. It was about control. And once I finally took that control back, they didn't know how to handle it. After all this time, I can see that they were never going to get it. And that's the hardest pill to swallow. I spent years thinking I could somehow fix this, that I could earn their respect if I just did enough. But the truth is, they weren't looking for a son. They were looking for someone who would fit their mold. And I just wasn't that person. The other day, I ran into one of my cousins at the grocery store. It was super awkward because, well, I'd muted most of my family and hadn't spoken to them in months. We exchanged a few words, the usual "how have you been" small talk, and then she hit me with it. You know, your parents are really hurting. They don't understand why you won't talk to them. I swear, I almost laughed. Like, was she serious? They didn't understand? I wanted to say something snarky, something like, oh, maybe because they skipped my wedding? But instead, I just shrugged and said, I guess they never will. I didn't have the energy to rehash it all again. The same old story, the same cycle of guilt and blame. I'm over it. After that, I told Jess about it, and she asked me if I felt bad about how things ended. I thought about it for a while. And you know what? Yeah, part of me does feel bad. Not because I think I'm wrong, but because this is my family. It's not like I wanted things to end like this. Who grows up thinking they're gonna cut off their own parents? But at the same time, I know it's what needed to happen. I couldn't keep letting them drag me down, especially not when I'm starting a new chapter in my life. Speaking of new chapters, Jess and I finally went on our honeymoon. We delayed it at first because of all the drama, but after things settled down, we decided it was time to just get away for a bit. We went to this little cabin up in the mountains, far away from everything and everyone. No cell service, no distractions, just us, a fireplace, and a stack of board games we barely touched because we spent most of our time talking. Being up there with Jess, away from all the noise, gave me a lot of clarity. We talked about everything. Our future, where we want to live, maybe having kids someday. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't carrying the weight of my family's expectations on my shoulders. I was just me. It was freeing in a way I can't really describe, but it made me realize that this, right here, is what I need to focus on. My relationship with Jess is everything now. She's been my rock through all of this, and I don't think I'd have gotten through it without her. When I'm with her, none of the other stuff matters. The drama, the guilt, the endless cycle of disappointment, it all fades away. And that's when it hit me. This is what family's supposed to be. It's not about who you're born into. It's about the people who stand by you, who actually give a damn about your happiness. I don't know what the future holds with my parents. Maybe one day we'll talk again. Or maybe this really is the end. Honestly, I'm not in a rush to figure it out. Right now, I'm focused on building the life I want with the people who matter most. And if that means cutting off the people who've caused me the most pain, then so be it. But here's the thing. I'm not angry anymore. I thought I would be, but I'm not. I'm just tired. Tired of the constant struggle for approval that was never gonna come. Tired of feeling like I had to choose between being true to myself or making my parents happy. Now I choose me, and that's a choice I'm finally okay with. It's funny. I always thought cutting ties would be this big, dramatic moment, but it wasn't. It was a slow, gradual process. Little by little, I realized I didn't need their validation anymore. And when I finally blocked them, it wasn't some grand act of defiance. It was just the next step, a necessary one. Now here I am, sitting in this apartment, waiting for Jess to come home so we can cook dinner together. It's the simple stuff like this that makes me happy. Not grand gestures, not approval from people who don't really care about me, but just living my life on my terms with the person I love. And that's enough. I don't know what's gonna happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with that. Whatever comes, I know I can handle it. And that's a pretty damn good feeling. So, yeah, that's my story. Thanks for sticking with me through all of this. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that family isn't about blood. It's about who's there for you, who shows up when it matters. And I'm lucky enough to have that, even if it's not from the people I thought it would be.